function or method allows us to create a display dialog with prompts, titles, buttons, an icon, and changing default buttons. And there's several different options for buttons. So the MessageBox Practice exercise asks you to create a Windows Form application depicted here with 6 buttons, and each button bringing up and displaying a different message box. We start off with a simple message box of just a prompt and a title, and by default it has an OK button. The second one, we change the buttons to yes and no, again with a prompt and a title. The third one, we use 3 different buttons, yes, no, cancel, with an icon. The fourth one changes the buttons to abort, retry, ignore, but makes the second button the default button. In the previous 3, the button on the left is the default button. There's a parameter we can specify to change the default button to either the second or the third button. The fifth option of our form does the same thing, again with OK cancel, making the second button or the button on the right, the cancel button, the default. And by default, I simply mean the user can press enter, and that's the same as clicking on that button. And then the final one does the same thing, but with yes, no, cancel, and cancel the third button in this case being the default. Let me walk you through my solution. I'm in Visual Studio. Here is my Form 1. It has 6 buttons, each with different text. The first one here, the button is named BTN MSG for Message Simple, BTN Message Buttons, I want to focus on the yes, no buttons, BTN Message Icon, we're adding an icon to this one, BTN Message Default, we're changing the default. This one is BTN Message More for more practice, which we're changing the icon and changing the default. And then last one is BTN MSG or Message Even More practice. That's how I named these. I can double click on each one of these and get to the code. So let's take a look at the code for each of these 6 buttons. So here's the first button, and we simply use MessageBox.Show. We include a prompt of press the enter key to continue, a comma, and then my title, simple OK message box. So when you're coding, you have a help system called Intellisense. It's developed by Microsoft to help you with coding specific things. So I'm going to type in MessageBox.Show, and when I press the parentheses, it brings up the Intellisense. And notice it says 1 of 21. This is what we refer to as overloading, in which we have 21 different possibilities in terms of how we could code that. So the first one is simply to show a string of text. I'm going to go to the second one, shows the Windows owner and the string of text. It's not the one I want. This is the one I want, string text and string caption. So it displays a message box with the specified text and caption. So I need 2 string variables or literal strings inside these separated by commas, and the first one is going to be the text of the button, and the caption is going to be the title of that. That's where I would enter the little string inside quotes, press the enter key to continue, a comma, and simple OK message box. Now as we move on to the next one, it's actually going to be element or Intellisense 5, option 5, string text, string caption, and a message box buttons.button. So I'm going to get rid of this, and I'll show you how that comes up as you're entering the code. So here's my code on that message buttons. MessageBox.Show again. My title, are you sure you want to do that? Comma. My caption is going to be with yes, no buttons. And then MessageBox buttons.yes, no. Now, just so you can see how this works, I'm going to go ahead and save a little typing by copying that. So as I'm in here, and I start to type message box buttons, it'll come up in the Intellisense. Again, I can just double click on that, do a period, and here are the options available to me as far as the types of buttons. Now we can't just choose any buttons, so we're limited on OK, yes, no, cancel, OK, cancel, abort, retry, ignore, OK, OK, cancel, retry, cancel, yes, no, and yes, no, cancel. So in this particular case, I want yes, no. So I can double click on that, close my parenthesis, and add my semicolon. So you can save some typing by using that Intellisense. Here's the third button, message icon button. Again, we have our prompt or text, our caption or title, message box buttons, yes, no, cancel. But the fourth parameter here is to add an icon. And same thing, I can just start type message, I can choose message box icon, do a period, and then I can choose what icon I want. Next button, we have our caption, we have our title, we have our buttons of abort, retry, ignore, we have our icon of error, and then here we're changing the message box default button to button 2. Our fifth button, where we're just doing more practice, we have our prompt, we have more practice as our title. I'm going to drop this down the next line just so you can see it here. We have our buttons of OK, cancel, our message box icon of none. Now I had to put that in here because it has to be this order of these 5 to get the default buttons. If I left this out, I'd get an error because there has to be some option there for the message box icon in order to get to the 5th one, which is the message box default button. So I used none. I didn't want an icon in that one. But again, I went the second button here, message box default button, button 2. And then this last one, which is our even more practice, is yes, no, cancel buttons. We're going to have an icon of exclamation, and then I want button 3 to be the default. So that's a walk through my code, and hopefully you now get the gist of how to use MessageBox to show a dialog box with a prompt, a caption or title, various buttons, an icon, and changing the default button. If you just jumped into this video, you can see all the videos from the C# Xamarin Programming Cohort playlist by clicking on the image in the lower right. And if you'd like to be alerted to future videos that I create, you can click my picture up in the top right and subscribe to the channel.